All right, so today we're going to look at timeline basics. This is something we haven't covered in a while. I'm going to go through a lot of the basic tips on using the timeline. For some of you who've been using Storyline for a while, this may make sense. Hopefully you'll learn something, but I answer a lot of questions in the community. A lot of these tips would come in handy for some of the new users. So we'll go through a bunch of different things that you can do with the timeline. All right, first thing we want to talk about is undocking the timeline. So a lot of times when you're working on a slide, you may do something like this. You want your whole slide to show, right? So you're working on it, you want it to be really big, but then you're always moving your timeline back and forth. You can undock the timeline. So if you click over here, you undock it, and then you can make the timeline as big as you want. So in this case, there's only 3 objects on the timeline. It's not a big deal. But if you had, 50 objects on the screen, then being able to undock it, work with the object, move it off screen really comes in handy. If you want to redock the timeline, you just click on the icon again and redock it. Now sometimes you may run into a problem like I've run into this where I have my timeline on a second monitor. I shut down Storyline, I go to my laptop, open it up later, I don't have that second monitor connected and somehow my timeline's missing. If you ever find your timeline's missing or any of the other docked objects, you just come up to the View tab and then you'll see Redock and it'll redock that timeline. So if it's hanging somewhere, you can bring it back. So that's working with the timelines. You can see you can also move the timeline up and down here. All right, so the next thing we're going to look at is kind of basic information here is the stacking order. So when you're working with the timeline represents the timing of the screen, obviously, right? So it's called a timeline. So right now the slide is 5 seconds long. I can make it, 10 seconds long. One of the things you'll want to think about when you're working with the timeline, if you look at these little arrows right here, this indicates that those objects are tied to the end of the timeline. So I can move those and slide those around, right? If I take an object and I drag it off the timeline, it's no longer connected to the end of the timeline. If I want to reconnect it, I just right click and then I can reconnect that. So I just click on show to end and then it'll connect to the end of the timeline. The timeline, if you don't have animations and things coming on and off the screen, the default of 5 seconds is fine. If you have a playhead on your player, it's going to play for 5 seconds. If you don't have anything going on the slide, you can set this to 1 second. It really doesn't matter because nothing's happening to these objects. They're permanently on the screen all the way until the end of the slide. If you take this object and you drag it out to 20 seconds and nothing's happening on the screen, the playhead and that scrub bar is going to take 20 seconds to get through that. So that's just something to keep in mind. When you're working with the objects here, you do have a stacking order, and you can see on the timeline, like the one on purple one right here is on top. If I want to put this behind the teal one, I can just come and drag this until let's actually move it so it's behind the teal one, right? You can see I can drag it. That changes the stacking order. So the objects on the top are on the top, the objects on the bottom kind of makes sense. So if you want to move things around, you can change it. That really comes in handy if you have something like this, right? So maybe this green thing might not be as easy to grab when you're working on the slide. If this was the green bar, you can quickly just drag it up to the top rather than trying to dig through the objects. All right, so that's your stacking order. Next thing, renaming objects, super important when you're working on your slides. The slide's not really busy, so renaming is probably not that big of a deal. But I do like to name objects. One is so I know what's on the screen. I can tell you right now when I troubleshoot files in the community, I'll see screens, they have like 80 objects on the slide and they're all rectangle 1, rectangle 2, all the way to rectangle 80. And it's hard to troubleshoot what the person's done because nothing is related to anything else on there. So for example, if I was working with these buttons, since it's A, B, and C, and I see I have a layer here, A, B, and C. What I might do instead of button 1, 2, and 3, I might do this. I'll rename it. I just double click BTN A, and then do that for the other ones. So now I know button A is related to choice A. So now when I create a trigger, and we'll just do that, we're going to create a trigger here. I'm going to create a trigger, and I'm going to say show layer. We'll say choice A when user clicks button A. So now when I'm looking at this, I can see A, and then when I go to troubleshoot, I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with the triggers, I can see A is going to A. So if you title things, it's a lot easier to figure out what's what on the screen. Next thing we'll look at is locking objects. Pretty common sense thing again. When we come in here, you've got your lock icon, and you can see we have objects on the screen. And if you select the lock icon, that's going to lock the object. And if you select the lock icon up here, it's going to unlock all the objects. If you select them all and you want to unlock just one thing, you can click on that. You can unlock individual things. Now, why would you want to lock objects? One reason, probably the main reason you want to lock objects is so you don't accidentally move them. For example, I've got my background here. This happens to me all the time. I may be working on something. I think I'm clicking on the orange thing here, but I click on the character and I do this. I go, and then I have to go backwards, right? And I don't want to click on that. If I go here and I want to select something, I'm going to select things. Then I'm going to select everything right here, right? But if I come in here and say, I only want to be able to say select this orange thing, I don't want anything else to move, I can come in here and lock everything and just deselect this orange object here. So if I work on this slide, I can't accidentally move anything. Works really great if you've got custom templates and you don't want people to hose the templates. You can just lock everything. And then when I go to select stuff, I'm only going to be able to select what's not locked. So if I reverse this, right, I only want to be able to select the buttons. I can turn that off. So when I'm working on the slide here, I can only select the buttons. Then I can move those around. So you can lock, unlock objects on the screen. All right, hiding objects, another simple thing that happens on the timeline. So I've got a lot of objects here. I need to work on my slide. This is actually a very busy slide, right? So here's a few kind of common use cases. One is I'm working on this character and I actually need to get to this orange background that I have in there. Maybe that's the back of her chair or whatever, right? So I need to get to that. I can't get to that. The only way I can get to that is by moving her or getting rid of her, right? So if I click on the character and I come to the character on the timeline and I hide it, now I can work on the object, and then when I'm done, I can bring the character back up. Now keep in mind, if you hide the object and you publish the course, those objects that are hidden are going to be hidden. Here's another common use case. I'm working on a slide. I'm using variables. I want to see what the variables are doing, so I want to know what the value is. But when I publish the course, I don't want this variable box to show. So I might come in here and call this variables, right? So I know what it is. And then when I'm ready to publish the course, I'm just going to hide that. And then anytime I need to see what the variables are, I can look at them when I'm doing my working on the slide and testing things. But when I'm done, I can hide those. So I don't need to delete it. This way it's always available to me for troubleshooting later. Another common use case is I might do something where, in this case, I'm working with the client. I've inserted some backgrounds. You can see I've got all these different backgrounds in here. I'm not quite sure which one the client wants to use. So again, I can come in here and I'm going to turn off all my backgrounds, and I might say, okay, do you want this background? Do you want this background? Do you want this one? Do you want this one, right? So I can put all of these on the screen so they're there, and then what I don't need, I can just turn them off, and at some point, I can delete them if I want to. But hiding and showing objects is a great way when you're working in there. Adding cue points. When you're working on your slide here, and you may want to put cue points to indicate things on the timeline, right? So let's say at the 3-second mark here, I want to have a cue point. So if I hit the letter C, that'll create a cue point for me. So I'm going to move the playhead to the 4-second mark, hit the letter C, that creates a cue point. If I right click, if I move the playhead, say to the 5-second mark, I can right click and then I can create a cue point at playhead. And then you can see I can also delete the cue points. Now, the cue points are nice. A lot of times I'll do things based on the cue point. Like if I have a trigger, instead of triggering it at 2 seconds, I might actually move the cue point to 2 seconds and have the trigger set to cue point 1. This way, if it's not quite right, I can just nudge the cue point until I get what I need. So the cue point just allows you to kind of set markers on the screen. And then, for example, you can, I thought I had an example built, but you can come over here and you can line these things up, right, based on the cue points. Now you can also right click and then you can see align to cue point 1, and then it'll align it to the cue point. So you can use the cue point to set markers on the screen, and then you can align things to the cue points. Again, 2 ways to do that. Set your playhead, right click, add a cue point right here. Or the other thing you can do is move the playhead and hit the C, and then the C button will create the cue point. All right, next thing we'll look at here is, we looked at cue points, grouping objects. This is something I do all the time. I'll show you 2 common use cases to know how grouped objects work. One is when I'm working on a slide, and if the slide has interactive things, I usually don't group those. I mean, you can, but I usually don't. But everything that's not interactive, like the characters not doing anything, all of these things are, let's say they're the decorative aspects of the slide. I don't need to have a big timeline with all these stacked objects in here. So what I'll do is first I'll probably lock the things I don't want to touch, right? So I know, like in this case, I'm going to lock all of these, and I'm only going to allow button 1, 2, and 3 to be editable by me, okay? And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select, well, actually, I'm going to do this the opposite way of what I just did. Everything I want to do is I want to select everything, right? Oops. I want to select everything except for the buttons. So let's turn the buttons off, right? So we're locking the buttons. And then I want to select everything on the slide. Now everything's on the slide that's selected except for the locked buttons. And then I'm going to do Control G, and that groups them. So now I can just say here, these are background objects. Now I can come over here, see this little arrow that lets me know things are grouped, and I can collapse it. I can still work on those things and move them around, right? Like I can come in here and move, I can come in here and move this object on the timeline inside the group. But when I group those objects that are static, then my timeline's collapse. So I can only focus now on those objects on my timeline that I need to work on, right? I turned those off by mistake. What we can do now is come in here and you could just lock that, and you can see that locks everything. So now you can't accidentally mess up anything in the background, and you're only going to work with the slide, the buttons. Another reason why you want to know about grouped objects, let's say you insert a icon. So we have these icons in here. Some of the icons are going to be grouped, and some of them are single images. So let me let's type in dog. Let's see what we get. Enter. We'll get a dog here. I'm going to go ahead and we'll insert this dog and see what happens. See, this is a good example. So I inserted the dog, and you'll notice the dog is grouped. So this dog is actually made of a number of images. And that may not be apparent when you're working with the object, right? So this object here, let's click on it again. If I ungroup this here, or open up the group, you can see this is made up of different shapes, which is kind of cool because I can come in here and say, maybe I want the dog's head to be white, and I want the dog's body to be brown. We'll just say green. I can colorize that icon that comes in. So some of the icons that you bring in will be grouped, and then you'll know it's grouped because it's like this. If you want to ungroup it, remember to group was Control G. If you want to ungroup it, Control Shift G, and that ungroups it, and then you can make it be a bunch of different shapes. All right, so next thing we want to look at is entrance and exit animations. When you're working with your slide, you can see here, I already pre-built these, but I have objects here. I go up to the animations tab. This one has a entrance animation, and then I could add an exit animation if I wanted to. What happens is when you add an animation, let's go ahead and insert new shape. I'll just insert this big smiley face here. Let's make it orange. So I've got this orange smiley face, and we'll just stretch this to the end of the timeline. Okay, so we've got the orange smiley face. I'm going to add an animation to it. So I'm going to go to entrance animation, and we'll do a fly in animation. And you can see there's a duration here. It's 0.75 seconds. And then you can see right here, this is indicating these slopes indicate that this is the entrance animation, and it's 0.75 seconds. I can drag this and change it. Personally, I like to come up here and manually type it in. So if I want to set this to 1 second, here you can see it set it to 1 second versus trying to drag this. But if you're trying to line things up on the slide, you can do that here and line them up. So you have an entrance animation on this. If I have an exit animation, just come over here. I will do the same thing, a fade, and then you can see I have my exit animation, and I can change that. The object, the timeline controls an entrance and exit animation. So when the object comes on the screen, that's when it's going to start the animation. When the object comes off the screen, that's when it's going to start the exit. So if I drag this object here to the 1 second mark, it's going to come on the screen, and this animation lasts 1 second. So it's not going to be fully into the screen until the 2 second mark. So that's something to keep in mind. So when the object enters the screen on this timeline, that's going to start the entrance animation. And when the object exits, like in this case, it's going to exit at the end of the slide. But if I do this, when the object exits the screen, that's going to trigger the timeline. So if this animation here, the exit animation, we'll just say it was 1 second, right? The exit animation is going 4 to 3. So if the object ends at the 4 second mark, the animation's 1 second long. That means the animation is going to start at 3 seconds. So just keep that in mind. So the timeline controls you can do the animations. You can see the animations that we have on here. You can see as I move them on the timeline, I can move the objects, and then the entrance is when the object comes on the screen. That starts the entrance animation. This is going to, the end of the object is the end of the exit animation, so you need to compensate for that time, right, between the start of the animation to the end point. But you have exit entrance animations up here, and then you can see you can move objects on the screen. Now, here's one thing that's really cool, the timeline visualization. So if you notice, I'm going to move my playhead here, and the slide's changing, but it's not, right? So the slide's not changing right here. As I move my playhead, I don't see what I'm seeing in real time. So for example, if I come down to the half-second mark, there really should be the title. This rectangle should be starting its animation process, and then the background should be there, right? But I can't, as I scrub through it, I can't see, well, I can because when I scrub through it, I can see the animations and how they work, right? But when I move the playhead, I don't see where they're at in real time. So if I come back here and I start to scrub through, you can see it showing me what the slide's going to look like. And Where there's animations, it's just going to do a fade. It's not going to do the fly-ins and all the different things. So I can see how the animation looks, but if I move my playhead here, you can see it's showing me everything on the slide. But what if I just want to see what the slide looks like at that point on the slide, right? We have this timeline visualization right here. So if you click on it, now you can see as I move the playhead's showing me what I'm going to see at that particular time in the slide. And again, if you have fly in, fly out animations, that's not what it's going to show you. It's going to show you as fades, so you can kind of get a sense of where things are at in here. But you're not going to get the real animation you have is the point here. So you can scrub through this and get a sense of how it's going to work. And then if you stop your timeline, it's going to show you what's on the timeline at that point. If I turn that off, I'm going to see everything that's on the slide. So if you have a lot of things flying on and off the screen, the visualization is a nice way to see what the slide's going to look like. If you say, oh, I need something at the 2-second mark, put your playhead at the 2-second mark, and you can see what's going to be on the screen at 2 seconds or at 1 second. All right, so the other thing, I won't go through everything on here, but if you right click on something on the timeline, like we'll come over here, if you right click on something on the timeline, you're going to see a lot of options available to you. Some of the stuff we've already talked about. There's some other things that I'm not covering today, but right clicking on the objects, you're always going to expose more options available to you, so you can play around with those things. And then paste special. This is a really cool feature. So you'll notice here that on this particular slide, I have the buttons that come in at the 1, 2, and 3 seconds, right? And the buttons have triggers. If I copy these and I want to do the same thing on another slide, and I copy those buttons and I come to this slide and I paste them, you'll notice that the timing and all that stuff's not working. I still have to, I get the triggers, but I have to fix the triggers, right? Because I might have different layers on this slide. But you'll notice the timing and everything that I had set up doesn't work. But I want this slide to be exactly the same. So let's go backwards. So if I do this paste special, you're going to see it's going to allow me to paste it. So I'm going to right click on the timeline, and you'll see that I have this option to paste special. When I go paste special, it's going to give me some options. Do I want to keep the source duration, which is that timing that we built? Do I want to keep the source start time and the triggers, right? Let's say I don't want the triggers, but I want everything else. I hit OK. Now you can see I've got all the timing and stuff is right, but the triggers are not available. Let's go backwards. Let's say I do want the triggers. I can do paste special, and I'll keep everything, right? I'm going to hit OK, and then you can see it pasted them all on the timeline the way they should be. It did the triggers. I have to hook up the triggers, but the triggers and everything available to you. So the paste special allows you to do more than just paste that object. If you just paste the objects on the screen, we'll go one more time. If I just paste the objects on the screen, it pastes them, it keeps the triggers, but I'd have to reset all the timing on here. All right, that's basically it. So a lot of really cool tips in there. There's really a lot more you can do with the timeline, especially when you're working with triggers and how you can trigger based on the timeline. But I just wanted to do a quick overview of some of the core features in the timeline. I know we have a lot of new users. There are some of those things that will be time savers for you, and definitely those things like locking and hiding and titling things. Those are big time savers when you're working on your slides. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask. We'll be in the channel moderating, and we can answer the questions there.